when the opportunity came up to host this panel, which we entitled "Bridging the Investment Gaps in Climate," the prize model, what I was most excited about was the collection of panelists that we could bring together here. So for those that don't know, XPRIZE runs very large incentive competitions to really attack some really hairy problems that are not getting innovation or not moving fast enough or what have you, and you'll hear a bit about it. But I'm very fortunate to have a set of panelists who all revolve around this space in one way or another. So I'll invite I'll say their names, I'll invite you all to come up as panelists, and then we'll kick things off. But to set the stage for it, what we have here is a collection of somebody representing the mentor space. So think of prizes bringing forth young companies or new startups that ultimately need to expand in their journey. And for that, we have Shanni Rao, who's the Director of Global Program Management at Creative Destruction Labs. So please welcome Shanni. And we also have a representative from an investor perspective, which is Owen Callan, who's a managing director of Bloom Impact Capital. And thank you. And then lastly, the innovator perspective themselves, somebody who's has his own company, started his own company, and can give you the perspective of the innovator. And so that's Marc-Andre Roberge, and he's the CEO and founder of Nectar. Please welcome Marc. So to start us off and to let them in their words, I'd love for each of you to describe what your intersection is with the prize model. We'll talk a bit about what the prize model means in this space and how we attack it, but all of you have had a different way in which you've interacted with an incentive competition model to deal with issues. Maybe I'll start with you, Marc, because you're at kind of the front end of that as an innovator. So please, Marc.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me. So I'm the CEO of Nectar. At Nectar, we use artificial intelligence to help migratory beekeepers adapt to climate and landscape changes, amongst other things. So we work with commercial beekeepers here in the US mostly, and a little bit in Canada, to help them figure out kind of what's keeping their bees alive and how to maximize profitability. Bloom is one of our investors. We went through CDL twice. Once it was a great experience, and the other one we were way too early. And then we also went through the AI XPRIZE back in 2017. So that's kind of our intersection across these specific stakeholders. But multiple times we have tried and succeeded and failed at leveraging the prize model.
Thank you for that. And so that's probably a good segue to you, Owen, as from your perspective, as Marc alluded to.
Yeah, so the Bloom Impact Capital recently launched the Bloom Local Food Fund, which invests in action on nature, climate, and community with a thematic focus on food systems change. And we come to the prize model with an investor perspective. And specifically, our experience with the XPRIZE was investing in one of the prize winners, which was Marc-Andre and his team in Nectar Technologies. And so the prize model in Nectar's case served as a source of validation. It was an early stage enterprise, as Marc was alluding to, when they first took a run at the prize, and machine learning and AI, which remain an emerging field, were even more emergent at the time. And so there were not the same range of market signals available to investors when making the investment decision. And the prize model and some of the technical due diligence that IBM Watson, which were one of the prize partners, were able to do, helped inform the investment decision. And we went on to invest in graduates from CDL, in the carbon traceability space, and other prize winners.
Thank you, Marc. Shanni.
Yeah, thank you. And hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Is anybody familiar with CDL, the Creative Destruction Lab? Okay, a few of us. We're a global deep tech startup program. We were founded in Toronto over 12 years ago. We've since expanded to over 12 locations around the world. We've got a location in Seattle, Montreal, Paris, all over. But we're here today to talk about our recent collaboration with XPRIZE. We're partnering with their top 100 carbon removal teams. So we've launched a dedicated carbon removal program. So excited to be able to see the shared understanding of two ecosystems coming together to get the founders what they need to get them to the next inflection point as they work towards, becoming finalists for the award next year. And very excited to be here.
Thank you, Shalini. So what we're going to do here over the next little while is take you a bit of on a journey, which really starts with the title of this is Bridging Those Investment Gaps in Climate. And the issues that we have to deal with climate are grand and difficult. So maybe starting a bit with unpacking the problem statement, like what's the problem with climate, but what's the challenge? What's the issues with catalyzing the type of capital that's needed towards these really long, complicated problems such as climate? Maybe Owen, I'll start with you. Like, where do you see the system not working, be that climate related or not, but these types of issues? And we'll get into later where the prize might fit, that might be part of the solve, but where do you see the problems with getting the capital to these types of issues?
Sure. I think often the problem with grand challenges is the tragedy of the horizon, the notion that the worst consequences and costs of that problem lie beyond the horizon, meaning beyond the business cycle. And so there are insufficient incentives at play for the market to mobilize to solve that problem. And when you have that kind of market failure in the face of externalities or public goods, there's usually a pretty strong case for intervention. And intervention can take a number of different forms. And one type of intervention is to deploy the prize model. I'd be happy to talk about what that can look like, but maybe I'll pause there.
So time horizon is one. Any others that come to mind, say, Shalini, as far as what are the gaps? And you see a lot of young startups or would-be startups trying to attack some nasty problems, but I'm sure they're having some issues sometimes aligning their vision and mission of what they're trying to achieve with the capital that they're trying to get. Anything to add there?
Yeah. I think about this all the time. If we had a marketplace that worked, we wouldn't even be here having this conversation, right? And so there are marketplace failures. And even for CDL, we typically are focused on seed stage startups, so companies that have technical co-founders that are really, they're experts in their space, but they're not commercially minded, and they need support from people who sort of built these businesses themselves to be able to come in and say, look, maybe you're thinking about the B2B to C pathway too early, and maybe, let's refine your fundraising strategy. What we miss too, and which is why we've collaborated with XPRIZE, is XPRIZE has created a signal for talent that we wouldn't have necessarily been able to connect with. And so these, founders in India, founders in, all over the world, tackling some very important problems, but again, just don't fit the CDL model. And so once they've de-risked some of that scaling, they come into us, and then we're able to take them from, where they are now into and shape their CEO mentality and help them succeed. But essentially, there's still a gap in the marketplace, and more collaboration is needed. And we need we need angels, investors, we need VCs. We've got, people that are cancer advocates in rooms supporting founders trying to build companies that don't traditionally attract VC institutional capital at the earliest stages.
Thank you. Maybe Mark, your perspective on this might be interesting, just in terms of, I would imagine, I don't even know how long-term your horizon was when you launched your company, but I can imagine that knowing what you do, you're really thinking about the long-term knock-on effects of, of your space, and I'll let you expand on that. What was that like, trying to get money based on that type of mission and time horizon?
So that's an interesting. So the first thought I had was that the horizon seemed pretty short term. Like initially, like, oh yeah, for sure we're going to be cash flow positive and profitable in 18 months. From launching. And I guess like some of the mistakes we made early on was to adapt our trajectory to some of the opportunities that came along, whether it was like accelerators or prizes and whatnot. But something that we ended up discovering along the way was that the horizon of what we're looking to accomplish is longer term than what we initially anticipated, and certainly longer than like the initial business cycle of the 5 to 7 years that most VCs are looking to invest into, like kind of get their money back into. So, but that it's kind of something we learned along the way by working with coaches from CDL, for example, by working with some of the technical experts that we encountered during the AI XPRIZE back in 2017 and 2018, and then working alongside some of our investors.
Well, that's probably a good segue to then what were you thinking when you embraced the prize model?
What was I thinking?
Yeah, and was it did you have investors that are saying, well, why would you use our money to go do this? Or what was going through your mind as an innovator trying to say, you have your path towards profitability that you're trying to hit, and then you say, oh, I've got this great idea. I'm sure it wasn't just to win the purse, but I don't know. What was going through your mind?
So I'm a first-time founder, and this is my first business. And a lot of times when you start and you're kind of, you have like maybe a small team, like a couple co-founders, you've got a few people around you that support your vision, maybe a few, like if they're not clients yet, like, people from your industry that, buy into your vision. But it's kind of easy to, the moment you get some amount of attention, to try to, when you start diverting some of your attention away from probably what you like, where you should stay, like focus on building the product, building the business. So early on, some of the prizes that we looked into maybe were not as relevant as the company's mission and vision and trajectory that probably should have been. That being said, ultimately, it helped us to get into these prizes and competitions and all that to be able to get the right mentors around us. And often, like, they helped us figure out where our focus should be. Sometimes it, was on the prizes, and sometimes it was outside of the prizes.
So I think then what that makes me think is the difference in motivations between what you have and potentially your funders and XPRIZE. So from an XPRIZE perspective, we focus first and foremost on the innovation and breakthrough that's going to be needed in that space. Not as much whether or not you have a good business plan for it, for you to compete in it. But both you, Owen, and Shani, I imagine you'd have a different perspective because you're not just looking at tech innovation. So I guess a first question is to the prize model. Do you think that's okay, that we're just focusing on getting innovations, technologies out of the woodwork? Or do you think, how do you think that parallels or stands up against that it needing to have a business plan attached to it or a viable investable company attached to it? So maybe Owen first.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that prize models can draw out of the woodwork as well are investors. So coming at it from an investor perspective, we were, talking about the tragedy of the horizon and how there's insufficient incentives amongst market participants to get behind solutions to problems. And in the case of the XPRIZE and Nectar, what we saw was investors coming out of the woodwork. So the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, which is a $250 billion pension plan in Canada, has a different set of incentives and risks that it's trying to grapple with than many market participants. So they have a lot of real assets. They have avocado farms in Australia. They have canola in the Midwest. They have blueberries in Quebec. And when they look at the rate at which pollinators are dying, they can see risks to their portfolio. And one of the things that's unique about them is that they have very long-dated liabilities. And so when a teacher graduates from teachers college and starts teaching in a high school, they acquire an obligation to pay that teacher a pension 50 years from now or 60 years from now. And so their models identify risks and threats that many other classes of investors would miss. And so they became one of the first customers of Nectar and helped to catalyze the next stage of its development. And so I think there's a technological piece that is core to the design and implementation of the prize. But if it's tackling market failures, as Chadney was describing, and as it has been designed to do, then it sends out a signal to other participants in the market, including investors, including asset owners. And I think that's quite a powerful piece.
And how about you, Shani? I mean, you've have direct experience with working. You'd mentioned you have a cohort just for the finalists coming out of our carbon removal prize. And so you're seeing what's coming out of the prize from the perspective of not just tech, but the non-tech side of it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think, look, and just doubling down on Owen's comment, XPRIZE does what it does really well. Other prize competitions that exist do what they do really well. CDL, Y Combinator, Plug and Play, StartX, Stanford StartX, they do what they do really well. And I don't think we're meant to also become, CDL's vision is not to be an XPRIZE. But again, I know we've missed on so many founders. An XPRIZE team that we're currently working with in the carbon removal program. We've missed in the past, or we've not accepted in the past, because we didn't see their criteria that fit technological requirements. And that signal that XPRIZE, participating in XPRIZE, has now provided our community with the confidence that they're on track to solving a very, very important, challenging problem, and nobody's going to have the answers. But at least that signal has de-risked that they're committed to this long term, and that's what we needed to see to be able to then bring other investors, lower carbon, other impact investment funds, angel investors, to be able to see that flag alone without knowing who these founders are. That signal alone is important, is enough to say, as a mentor, I'll commit my time. I don't know who you are, but I'll commit my time. And if we like working with each other, there's so many things that can sort of that arise as a result of that.
While we're on that, then, you're a university-based program, and we on our prizes, easily 25% of our top finalists are coming out of academia. Which means they're not in the market before the prize starts, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on academia-based innovators? Because a lot of the keys to these problems that we are addressing are probably sitting in a lab somewhere or in a university somewhere, but that's a certain class of innovator that is very different from maybe somebody who's a seed round startup.
Yeah. And no offense to anybody that represents universities here, but we were founded to push the boundaries of research, high potential research out of the lab. And so we work best with PhDs, postdocs, and I can tell you, we had two postdocs from UC Berkeley join us in the Vancouver climate room, working on a high potential technology, 2 months one way, running out of capital, with serious publications in climate journals. And it took one angel investor in the room to get a $1 million round together. And that only happened as a result of just a conversation in the room. There's so many cases we've seen at CDL of founders, really, 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 fantastic founders working in fantastic technologies that need just one person to love them, not 10 people to like them. But I don't know if that sort of addresses.
No, definitely. Owen, how about you? When you look for things to invest in, as far as those opportunities coming directly out of academia?
I was hoping to duck this question entirely out of apprehension of offending universities, but Chudney's gone there first. I think it speaks to where prizes and other tools can play a role in the technical and technical readiness journey. I think that investors, generally, universally have core competencies around assessing investment readiness. But not in every instance, in every emerging vertical, will they have all of the technical competencies required, nor line of sight on the solutions, which may well be buried in academia. And so I think you're looking for, tools, prizes, accelerators that are going to pull out the most promising technologies and provide some of that early validation. The literature on universities is mixed in terms of their ability to commercialize innovation and the success of the incubators and the programs that they build in-house to do those things. So the results are pretty varied. So from an investor perspective, it depends a great deal on the institution, the vertical, its level of maturity, and so on.
So, but what I am hearing as a common denominator across both of you, and then Mark, I'd like to take this back to you. In your experience, is that whether that entity is ready to stand in front of an investor or not, or to figure out how to commercialize and go to market, there is a value to having a prize model to at least validate that the technology does what it was said to do, right? how much, Mark, did that benefit you when you were on your prize journey? I mean, did that provide you with did it push you in a different direction? I know the prize you were operating on was not specific to just your space. It was a general, how do we use AI to better mankind? And you found a way to do that. But how much did that technical validation help or hurt you on where you were heading?
Oh, I think it definitely helped from the perspective of providing the right coaches and mentors around us. Like, around the price model, often there's a group of experts that will not only look at what the tech is, but interact with some of the founders or technology developers to kind of make sure that you're thinking about it the right way. And we like to think that having a design background, like the culture of the company is very much kind of iterative in its form. So we love getting feedback, and we will kind of adjust according to the feedback that we're receiving. So we did get a lot of value. It also gave us credibility when we were heading out to speak to investors, when we were in most cases with our type of clients, like it's farmers, they don't really go to these events, but with the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, for example, like it did add weight to the technology that we were developing, and they were one of our first clients. I would think partially because of the institutions that we engaged along the way, whether it was, we did CDL Toronto with the AI stream back in the days. We also did CDL in the Rockies, so in Western Canada, to do like the ag-tech specific streams. So that really, brings weight around the company and the technology that you are developing.
So I guess we've established that, yes, the validation that gets performed on a competition proves that you have something. Generally speaking, this definitely applies to XPRIZE, but probably to many other incentive competitions platforms, is they're doing a competition around a space that's not moving fast enough, or VCs aren't going after it because it's too risky, it's too hairy. People question whether there's a business model, which means that we're like pre-seed with as far as the types of innovators that are going to come to the table, which also means that you take like the carbon removal prize that we're running right now. There was a year ago 300 top teams that were taking many different approaches to attack carbon sequestration. To what extent should we, especially as we're all trying to solve these grander problems and trying to anticipate, okay, what does the world look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? To what extent can the prize be that kind of bellwether, that indicator of, wow, yeah, carbon sequestration from the ocean is a thing, is something that we should really be anticipating down the line. For either you, Owen or Shani, like how much does that act as an indicator for you for where you might want to focus on next, or what the future brings?
Oh, it's everything. I think it's the again, we've passed on so many founders that are doing some incredible work that have now raised institutional capital because of the work that, XPRIZE has done in again, getting them out of the woodwork. So there's, if you look at the sort of pipeline of innovation happening, you've got university incubators, you've got prize competitions. University incubators are typically focused on, obviously, technologies coming into the university, but where we've seen, even in in a climate room at CDL, we've seen very technically savvy founders take years to raise their first institutional capital round. And it's just, I don't know how many founders we have here, how many investors we have here, but it's a lot of signaling that is required to raise, a fantastic, to get your first seed round published in TechCrunch. There are a lot of signals that are required. And so this is a very effective marketplace of XPRIZE trying to find areas that we're not focusing on, but to get, again, CDL, other institutional investors working with XPRIZE, maybe following the work that you're doing to, again, support the founders.
Mark, Owen, you similar?
Yeah, I certainly think that with the tougher to solve problems where solutions are still emergent, to a degree, you sometimes need, field building above and beyond the assessment that an investor is going to do on any individual opportunity. You're looking for kind of critical mass in terms of an ecosystem to support solutions to that problem, and so the prizes can play a pretty significant role in defining the box in which a number of actors, sponsors, partners advisors, coaches, investors are going to collaborate and try and solve problems.
So if we kind of come back to the start of this, where we were talking about the challenges that we're facing with these challenges, and a lot of it was about that time horizon for capital, siloed type sources of capital, and then I think the challenges are complex. So how are we going to have the solution? Well, I think the solution piece, driving innovation, I think we've talked about it a fair bit, that it helped companies like yours to actually get on the map. It helps bring innovators out of the woodwork. It helps tell the investor community this is what's coming. And the I think the next step after the prize, and frankly, where you have an impact on the world, is more so after a prize is over, not while you're competing on it. Comes down to like your ability to then scale and to get that investment after the prize is over. So first off, for you, Mark, what was that like? I mean, how difficult was scaling after you had said, okay, I now have this validation that I've developed this. The prize has shown that I can do what I say I can do. But now what next? What was that like?
I wouldn't say it's as linear as that. I wish it was. Where like, you get the success of the prize and then, you scale and everything is very, so it's been a bit of an iterative, loop once again. And at different moments, like inflection points in the history of the company, we went back to the prize model a couple of times, like to get the right support around us. So when we did XPRIZE and CDL AI, that was in very early stage of the company, to get the right technical mentors around us. And then we raised a pre-seed round. And then right after raising a seed round in 2021, 2022, we ended up going back to CDL in the Rockies, this time not to get the technical mentorship, but more about getting the right, scaling up and going to market type of mentorship, right? And we got a few, AgTech CEOs that went through the process, AgTech, CEOs that went through the process as well of scaling up a company. So I don't know if the prize model should only be considered for the, pre-seed type of companies. We did go back to it a couple times to be able to get the right support. So that being said, it really depends on what type of company you're building. Like we see kind of the mistakes sometimes being done in both directions, where companies with technologies that will take 10 years to develop go to market and raise funds way too early, and it probably should have stayed into the prize model or like the type of kind of technical acceleration longer before raising money. Then you see the opposite, and that's something that we did a couple times, where you should probably be doing market validation and raising money, but instead you're drawn toward some prizes that may seem to be adjacent or like complementing to your vision, but that's not like where your core focus should be. So it really depends on what type of company you're building, what's the vision, and what's the ideal trajectory that you would like to build.
Shani, I'm sure you see every flavor of that come through your programs. Is it consistent with that, or would you have advice for that next company in each of those categories based on what Mark just said?
Honestly, it varies. It comes down to what you want to get out of the program, right?
Mhm.
Marc-Andre, maybe tell us about the first time you experienced just the community at CDL. What were you looking for? And did your mind, did you get something else that opened your mind and, in terms of, oh, I wasn't expecting this, and
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah, we were looking mostly for technical mentorship. And then a lot of the feedback that we received was that, we should be looking at market validation as soon as possible, because we were kind of caught into the initial, you do one accelerator, then the other accelerator comes to you and like wants to bring you in. And then you end up doing like, 6 months of accelerator program, and you've never really gone to see like a client during that moment, which is not a great loop to be caught in as a founder. So at some point, like when we went through CDL, it was a pretty brutal but eye-opening process, where like the mentors are very candid. It's very like kind of in your face type of feedback, which is, I think, a good thing. And they were like, cool building the technology, but like go out there and go meet with potential clients and then come back. So that's what we ended up doing.
Yeah. So same. We had a Dutch founder who now based in California, working on plant-based protein, Lemna. So they built these duckweed ponds in the Netherlands. Came to California to raise capital, couldn't, and then joined the Climate Stream in Vancouver. And what I saw in the room was just very cool people talking about just different financing paths, and they've recently raised their Series A. So their yogurt, first plant-based yogurt product, is going to get to the market really soon. But it's just it requires people who are interested in being able to solve problems with founders, and it also requires founders being open to just the very direct feedback and candid feedback.
So one common denominator there, regardless of the matching the right, say, phase of your evolution where you want to be with the investor, is that I think we've established, you've experienced it, that the prize model does help create this army of innovators, right? And I find that the investment community, no offense, Owen, is like that you're there to reap the benefits of it,
Yes.
but how do we get you or your organizations like yours or other organizations, frankly, like where is there organizations that can help us prime that pump?
You sure time is not up on this?
Still got a few more minutes. Sorry.
So you're describing a free rider problem where beneficiaries of an ecosystem are not giving back, and specifically, VCs are engaging in free riding on prize models, on accelerators, I think folks in the impact space would generally agree that VCs get away with a lot of bad behavior, and free riding is one of many sins. Chief among them the fact that only 2% of venture capital goes to majority women firms in 2024, which is shocking. And I can see some faces at the back of the room who maybe didn't know that stat, whose jaws are dropping. Then that gets us to the sort of question of, well, how do you change that behavior? The sort of most reliable theory of change that I have observed with respect to changing the behavior of market participants starts with mobilizing asset owners, and then having asset owners mobilize asset managers and service providers and make interventions that change behavior at the firm level. And I think we've seen that causal relationship at work in public markets with the advent of sustainable investing, where there's been considerable movement. You may be sort of long or short on that, but certainly over the last few years we've seen movement. And I think in private markets it is more opaque, more resistant to that kind of influence. To apply that sort of basic theory of change in a private markets context, I think similarly means engaging with asset owners, anticipating where they're going next, what their priorities and risk management imperatives are, and seeking to engage them in building an ecosystem where the beneficiaries are also giving back. And I think there are incentives to do that. If there is underinvestment in what is effectively research and development by both public and private actors, you will over time get declining productivity, which is not good for markets and not good for investors. And if you look at the data on U.S. investment in R&D over the last 14 years, you'll see that decline from about the time of the global financial crisis, and consequent impacts that ultimately show up for investors in a number of ways. And I think there are places where folks are taking the approach of mobilizing asset managers first and getting good results. And a jurisdiction that comes to mind is Quebec. And so you've got a number of actors there, one of which is the CDPQ, which is a $425 billion Quebec pension fund. And next time you're in Montreal, Andrew, or any of you, I'd encourage you to visit Espace CDPQ, which has been space, many floors, kind of glass building in Montreal, created by the fund, where they have brought together asset managers. And you'll find the leading VCs, the leading impact investors, all co-located, working in the same space, collaborating. They're paying back. And supporting the other floors in this space where you've got impact ventures that are doing the kinds of work that Marc-André and Chadney have been speaking to. And it's a highly collaborative model, and they have been showing results. So they are a factory for prize winners. They're a factory for folks that are going out and solving tough problems.
Maybe they could be our next prize sponsor. Shawnee, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, maybe they're not supposed to. Maybe their mandate and the incentives for a VC firm are designed to not. There's no incentives to help to get them to participate even earlier in the stages of innovation that XPRIZE and CDL is. And maybe we're not. Maybe that's not the problem we're supposed to be solving. As long as they're part of the conversation in the room, as long as we've got again, they're impact focused funds that are just being a part of the conversation. I think the changing mindsets and changing, just influencing how we could bring on even more institutional investors earlier in the journey is going to take time. And I don't think there's an easy black or white solution. But as long as, again, the right folks are involved in the conversation. And that's what we've seen in the room so far.
I guess the question is, what does involvement mean? In other words, maybe, and we hadn't even talked about this before, but say, Mark, to you is like, if you were from putting on your hat as a prize alumnus and as a founder, if you were to join a prize that said, if you win, you're guaranteed a certain amount of investment from this, like almost like negotiate upfront the terms of your seed round, should you win that prize, it would involve getting those folks to the table well earlier than they are involved, because right now, again, we're talking about typically spaces that they're not investing in today. And this is a total hypothetical for all of you, is like, what if I was designing a new competition today for a space that's getting zero investment and saying, come join that discussion, have a hand in architecting what the actual criteria is that Mark would have to meet. And, do you think that they would, and then, but if he does meet it, and assuming we can agree on commercial terms that you will invest in it, do you think that utopia could ever happen? And, probably for you, Owen, and you, Shawnee, could you see that happening? And then you, Mark, would that be attractive to you or as a founder?
Probably. And it depends, right? So it depends if it's if the prize and the investors are aligned on the specific requirements of the space and the problem that's trying to be solved, then it makes sense, right? And it kind of goes back to, as a founder, you want to go toward some of these vehicles that make sense for the vision and the trajectory that you're designing for. So if the prize that's being put together guarantees an investment at the end, is aligned with your commercialization strategy, or if the investors are, I don't know, like if I'm building a robotic company in agriculture, typically it takes, more than 5 to 7 years before you get your money back as an investor. So if that's what I'm building and the investors are okay with the company returning money to the fund in 10 to 12 years, probably, then, sure. But it needs to be kind of very aligned on both from the investors, the founders, and then whoever, like other stakeholders, like the catalysts that are putting together the prize, where like the outcomes are kind of aligned between the different stakeholders. Yeah.
Owen, Johnny, what do you think of this?
Go for it.
I mean, I think it's well articulated by Marc-Andre that there needs to be a degree of alignment amongst the investors and the designers around the problem that you're trying to solve and the type of solution that you're bringing to bear. So I think if you can satisfy those conditions, a world where you've got a pre-existing term sheet is not entirely implausible. I think there are nuances around, leading around and negotiating terms that would no doubt kind of play out in fairly traditional ways. But having the bare bones of a term sheet on the table would certainly grab the attention of investors, and I would think, provided there was, sufficiently credible actors engaged, would be, appealing to startups.
So here's what we're saying. We're saying there's a problem. There are other organizations outside of, VCs are interested in deal flow, but everybody else is doing the work in shaping, thoughtful people into potential CEOs for these VCs to then, gain benefits downstream. And here's how I think about it. So we're doing all the work, right? And so what CDL tries to do is we try to get people in the room not just for deal flow. In fact, predatory behavior is not encouraged. The work that we incentivize them to do in the room, because we've done all of the sort of upstream work, is problem solve with the founders. If you're not going to invest right away, raise your hand to support a founder working on figuring out a financing strategy for, where the use of funds is really just trying to get two LOIs, two partners, in the span of 1 year. You have the connections, work with them to do that. That's the work we get you to do, because again, you're coming in and benefiting from the work that we've done. And hopefully that exchange is sort of, valuable for the community. It's valuable for us. And yes, if there's an investment, huge win for all of us. But again, the incentives are so misaligned. They're not going to come in at the earlier stages shaping founders, because they're focused on, again, portfolio development for their, companies. But again, this method of volunteering to work with founders that you had a hand in shaping into this fantastic CEO who's raised, your Series A and then Series B and so on and so forth, I think is incentive enough to.
Whatever the solution, we're going to need to figure out how to measure the effectiveness of it. And so, since we're all mission aligned in one way or another, just playing different roles here, putting on my hat, I have to measure the impact of prizes and the impact that the innovators have on the world, so that I hold true to our mission and to our donor community and what have you. In this journey towards using this model or using your resources to tackle some of these grand challenges, I'm just curious how each of you measure your own impact or check yourself. Are you doing the right thing, or are you, I'm sure for you, so we'll start with you, Mark, it's going to be a very different answer, but still you have this vision of how you're going to benefit the world. How do you measure that? And do you have a way that you even check yourself? Am I focusing on the right things?
Yes. Probably, I wouldn't say constantly, but like pretty often we kind of revisit, are we going into the right direction from the perspective of and we're going to get niche a little bit, like in beekeeping. So about 30% of the food that we grow depends on honeybee pollination, right? So the people we work with, our clients, are beekeepers. So their role is to bring honeybee colonies to different orchards and fields to provide pollination services to growers like almond producers here in California and Central Valley. You've got tons of almonds. So the people showing up in February are beekeepers. So that's the work that they do. So kind of our theory of change is that, we need to make sure that these folks are resilient. So one of our core metric is profitability of our clients, and then survivorship of their livestock, right? Because they're losing about 45% of their hives. Something that we're starting to look at is, can we measure the outcomes of landscape management in agriculture related to pollinators in general and not just honeybees? So from that perspective, we are trying to find the different leverages that we can have to have a positive effect. So we can certainly measure the outcomes on our, kind of today's work and what we're doing. But on the longer term stuff, where I think we could, again, leverage the prize model, we don't really have all of the metrics yet because we're not exactly sure how that's going to play out for ourselves. So that's kind of where we're at.
How about Shani? How about you?
Yeah. So for accelerators, obviously, there's a quantitative impact measurement. It's equity value created. We're we're humbled and very proud to have played a small part in founders all over the world who've collectively raised about $33 billion in equity value now. I care more about the qualitative, intangible moments where you see a founder who, again, has no ecosystem support, raising capital from people in the community, but also more than that, just being lifelong partners on this journey, this long journey that continues after, a CDL accelerator program or a competition, award. And those moments where you see a founder just changing their mindset on, there's a whole new market that I haven't even thought to explore. And, there's milestones that I can now start to work on, are not talked about enough, and they're hard to measure. But the satisfaction on the face of sort of the founder is just unmatched.
I think for an investor perspective, an impact investor, the portfolio company's metrics will become our metrics. So the survivorship of bees becomes an important metric for us, alongside measures of growth that also measure impact, like the the percentage of commercial beehives in North America that are on the platform, and it's an increasingly impressive number each quarter. And then we embrace a set of metrics that will be familiar to many impact investors, and we're keen to adopt common and near universal standards to provide LPs and others with comparability across the options that they have for investment in terms of the impacts that they're seeking to achieve. And then another important source of signal for us is, of course, we're investing at, say, the Series A stage, is those follow-on rounds. And so we pay a lot of attention to those larger cap investors and the check and or validation that they're providing.
Well, certainly from our perspective, feel the same way and feel that more transparency about how we're measuring our own impact for all of our organizations could be one way to break down some of these silos that we definitely are seeing. So to that end, and with just the few minutes we have left here, we have an exercise at XPRIZE when we're designing a new prize, which is we don't say where are we today and what do we want to do next. We say what's the vision for where we expect to be 5 years from now, 20 years from now, whatever. And what does that look like? So maybe I'll ask each of you is like, let's just say it's 5 years from now, and a number of these people were clearly inspired by what they heard today, and have gone out to help break down those silos and leverage these types of strategies towards driving innovation towards these problems and driving capital towards them. Any thoughts as to what that looks like? One of the ways you can do it, even to think, is like, what is that headline that you read 5 years from now, and what does it say? So maybe Shani, I'll start with you. And
we do this exercise too. We do an all hands retreat every year. We ask our staff to do a newspaper headline for whatever industry area that they're focused on. And the common theme that we've seen in all these years is just impact. Like, are we seeing space innovations? Are we seeing multiple SpaceXs? So we've got in our space program, we have multiple SpaceX people who were ex-SpaceX employees start to take these risks. But it all started with Elon trying to do something big, and we want to see more of that everywhere in every industry area. AI, quantum computing. We had a postdoc of Xanadu. Oh, sorry, yeah, the CEO of Xanadu, who recently they've demonstrated quantum advantage. Don't ask me what that means, but it's a huge technical milestone. Came to CDL just out of a postdoc, had no business sense, and has now raised over $1 billion. And again, equity value created aside, how are we facilitating and incentivizing folks like that are not traditionally impact focused to come together to support very, very technically hard challenges? Again, all in the service of making humanity, in the service of commercializing science for the betterment of humanity.
Owen, how about yourself?
I often defer to my betters on these kinds of questions, and we heard this morning from Cristina Figuera, the chief negotiator, one of the chief negotiators of the Paris Climate Pact, and she talked about the next frontier being nature. And I know there's also, had the chance this morning to talk to a few folks who have just arrived at SOCAP from COP, where we had commitments that are, bordering on $200 billion from asset owners into nature-based solutions to climate challenges. And so I think the headline I would like to see in 5 to 10 years is $200 billion deployed into nature-based solutions. And that's, I think what folks who are making those commitments will disclose in private is that there are not enough products to invest in. There are not enough solutions at the early stage or at the scalable level yet in order to fulfill those commitments. And so it seems like an area that is ripe for the prize model, ripe for accelerators, and that gives you that kind of alignment with asset owners who are upstream and early, but will need the ecosystem to rally around them in order to be able to deliver on those promises.
Thank you. We're going to be going to Q&A right after Mark's answer to this question, so get your questions ready. Mark, quickly, any thoughts on that?
Not particularly. I think Owen and Shani definitely answered probably better than I could have. I would love to see more vehicles around like solving the crisis around biodiversity. We talk a lot about climate change. At COP15, it was like one of the main discussion was around how it's a twin crisis. It's not like one crisis, it's two different crises happening at the same time right now. And definitely need more collaboration, like, takes a village to build these vehicles. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you all. So we have some time for some questions. Are there any questions?
Hi there, I'm Lila Holzman. I'm with Rocky Mountain Institute in our climate finance program. Maybe a two-part question. Acknowledging the title of this is around bridging investment gaps in climate, and I think we just heard a little bit about nature-based solutions, but also just wondering, like, what else in climate do you see as maybe has a potential to benefit from this kind of model? And then I also hate, I don't know, just a little bit of a skeptical question, but in the plenary, we heard a little bit about some other areas that XPRIZE supports, like anti-aging. I just have to ask, like, are there some areas that maybe we're putting prize money in that maybe are actually counter to some of the other areas and definitely not as a high priority?
Maybe I'll let our panelists answer the first question. Obviously, the second one. I even have a thought on the first question, but thoughts on the use of this type of model towards other climate areas. Shawnee, you want to say, based on you've worked with a number of climate tech type companies who have gone through a competition model.
Yeah, maybe I don't know if this will answer your question, but let me tell you about how we think about what areas to focus on, and we let the founders tell us. And so, if we're noticing an increase in applications on water scarcity, then we bring together a mentor community focused on that, and we decide, okay, this is the trigger to launch something dedicated to this, and that's how we launched a carbon removal stream, because our climate tech streams were so diverse, and so we've seen all kinds of sort of applications focused on all challenges, very, very climate focused, but not dedicated to one industry area or one vertical within climate. And that worked well for the founders in the room and the mentors in the room. But we didn't see, until carbon removal, we didn't see a niche or a need for at least focused efforts around one, on one vertical. And so carbon removal was our first venture, and I hope there's more. But we're going to follow the lead of XPRIZE in the market research for these are the problems that if it is worth taking this risk on, because if this gets solved, and we see a community of sort of problem solvers in this community, the solutions are so worth it, even if the time horizon is 20 years, 30 years, or 40 years. So again, I don't know if that answers the question. But.
Well, I think, and I can add to that too, and address your second question, which is, I would assume you'd all agree, there's nothing about the prize model that is sector specific. But if you've got an area, you mentioned desalination as a perfect example. We have a prize in desalination, right? It's a very traditional industry that has a small number of players who have no problem taking a lot of money to build a very expensive, power-hungry plants that are not doing great things for the environment. It needs innovation. It needs a spark. It needs a catalyst. You could apply that to most every area of where innovation could be part of the solve, in climate, in biodiversity, in education, in food, water, and waste. Even the longevity prize, it's about, and we judge so first off, we ourselves are very careful where we launch prizes. We don't follow the money. We frankly turn down more prizes than we launch by far, because we are a mission-driven organization and a nonprofit, right? We can only run a limited number of prizes at any one moment in time. We run 7 right now. We'll probably go to 10 next year, maybe. The longevity prize is about the fact that we are living longer, but we're not living healthier. Our last 20 years of our life, especially for women, are generally less healthy than they are for men. And so we're prolonging a lifespan, but we're not necessarily prolonging a good life. So that prize is all about, how do we make more out of this life and improve those last 20 years of your life? And that prize is actually only applicable to people 60 to 80 years old, and improve their quality of life during that phase. And we stand by all of that. And I think we all should. I said we should be transparent with our impact metrics and our measurement, and we all should, because we got to make sure we've got plenty of problems. Let's make sure we're focusing on the right ones. Other questions? No? Well, then I guess I'll close it out, but I'll give the opportunity for each of our panelists to add any other thoughts that they have. I do appreciate you coming together in this, and especially in this realm where we're all working in different aspects of part of the problems that we're trying to solve here. And I think, although there's no one silver bullet for this, I do think that it's part of this solve is us all coming together in certain ways in the area that we are to help support the other areas that we operate towards these grand challenges. But maybe I'll start with you, Shawnee. Any other thoughts before we close out?
Can I do a question to the room? Actually,
Sure.
I'm just trying to understand, your backgrounds. Are we founders? Are we investors? Why are we here? Is it, what's the sort of common theme around why we're here today? So, show of hands for founders. Okay, cool.
Nice.
Show of hands for investors. And and the rest of us, are we operators, community advocates? Anybody want to shout out what they represent if they haven't raised their nonprofits? Okay, cool. Okay, I think this is so cool. I think this is great. I don't know if we've we've answered some, or if there are other questions that we can answer, but I think it's going to take more of this.
Fully agree.
Yeah.
That's a good way to end that. Mark, yourself?
No specific thoughts other than like we need more prizes for long-term problems, solutions that tackle problems that will take more than the business horizon that Owen mentioned.
Yeah, I think skeptical questions are good, and I think it's in part the role of nonprofits to participate in investor conferences and ask skeptical questions. And I think that social finance and impact investing kind of bring folks together who are often at different ends of a spectrum. It's inclusive of folks that are maybe starting from the place that the market has many failures and they're seeking to challenge or to solve for that. And then there are others who are going to be coming to the table with a focus on where the public sector is weak and trying to bring private market solutions to bear. And in the course of coming together, bring different values. And I think that ultimately the tensions between those values, the trade-offs that sometimes are getting made based on those values are important to identify and call out, to surface those contradictions, and to find questions like how to solve for the threat to pollinators and supply of clean drinking water that doesn't require heavy energy solutions to provide, and then rally folks around those questions. So welcome the skepticism.